The spaceship Eos drifted silently through the vastness of space, its sleek metallic surface glinting faintly under the distant light of a foreign sun. Inside, Daniel Harper leaned back in his chair, staring at the swirling colors of the planet, growing larger in the viewport. It was their destination, a world unlike any other, home to the Zorathians, a yen alien species known for their incredible advancements in science and medicine. Beside him, Rachel Meyer tapped nervously on her tablet, reviewing notes for what felt like the 100th time. "This is it," she said softly, breaking the silence. "First contact, no pressure, right?" Daniel chuckled, though there was no real humor in it. "Yeah, no pressure at all. Just don't embarrass humanity while we're here." Rachel shot him a look, but couldn't help smiling. "You either. Try not to wander off and touch things you shouldn't." "Hey, I'm just the guy who fixes stuff when it breaks," Daniel replied with a grin. "Not my fault if something looks interesting." They shared a laugh, but beneath the light-hearted banter, both were acutely aware of the weight of their mission. Humanity had spent decades searching for intelligent life beyond Earth, and now they were about to meet one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The stakes were impossibly high. A single misstep could mean disaster, not just for them personally, but for relations between their two species. As the Eos entered orbit around the planet, the crew prepared for landing. The Zorathians had invited them to visit as part of a cultural exchange program, eager to learn more about these newcomers from a distant corner of the universe. For weeks leading up to the trip, Daniel and Rachel had studied everything they could about the aliens, their language, customs, and technology. But nothing could have fully prepared them for the moment they stepped onto the surface of the alien world. The air inside the Zorathian facility was cool and crisp, carrying a faint metallic scent that made Daniel wrinkle his nose. Around them, towering structures of shimmering material rose into the sky, their surfaces shifting subtly as if alive. The Zorathians themselves were tall and slender, their skin a pale silver that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Their large, almond-shaped eyes regarded the humans with a mixture of curiosity and caution. A representative named Vexa greeted them, her voice smooth and melodic as she welcomed them to their world. She explained that the purpose of the visit was not only to share knowledge but also to foster understanding between their peoples. Daniel nodded along, trying to appear calm despite the knot of nerves twisting in his stomach. Beside him, Rachel maintained her professional demeanor, asking thoughtful questions and jotting down notes. Things went smoothly at first. The humans marveled at the Zorathians' technological prowess, particularly their medical facilities. The aliens demonstrated devices capable of diagnosing illnesses instantly and curing ailments that would take years to treat on Earth. Daniel found himself awestruck by the precision and efficiency of their tools, wondering how humanity could ever hope to match such advancements. But then came the accident. It happened during a tour of the research labs. Kale, one of the lead scientists, was demonstrating a new piece of equipment designed to analyze biological samples. As he adjusted the settings, a sudden surge of energy caused the machine to malfunction. Sparks flew, and a sharp crack echoed through the room. Before anyone could react, Kale collapsed to the floor, clutching his side. Panic rippled through the assembled group. Several Zorathians rushed forward to help, lifting Kale onto a nearby examination table. Vexa barked orders in their native tongue, and within moments, a team of physicians arrived, scanning him with handheld devices. Daniel and Rachel watched from a distance, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of the way. "What happened?" Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Daniel replied, his eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before them. "Looks bad, though." The Zorathians worked quickly, their movements precise and coordinated. Yet despite their efforts, Kale's condition continued to deteriorate. His breathing grew labored, and the wound on his side began to swell unnaturally, taking on a sickly green hue. One of the physicians shook their head gravely, exchanging worried glances with the others. Vexa approached Daniel and Rachel, her expression grim. "Our methods are failing," she admitted. "We cannot identify the cause of this reaction, nor can we counteract it. Without intervention, Kale will not survive." Rachel gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "Is there anything we can do?" "Any way we can help." Vexa hesitated, clearly reluctant to admit weakness in front of the humans. Finally, she sighed. "If you have knowledge or tools that might assist us, we are open to suggestions." Daniel stepped forward, his heart pounding. He wasn't a doctor, far from it, but something about the wound looked familiar. Back on Earth, he'd often helped his grandmother tend to minor injuries using plants and natural remedies. The inflammation reminded him of infections he'd seen treated with aloe vera, a plant renowned for its healing properties. I might have an idea," Daniel stammered, feeling every eye in the room turn toward him. "It's not much, but it's worth a try." Vexa raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Explain." "Well," Daniel began, fumbling for words, "on Earth, we use certain plants to treat wounds and reduce swelling. One of them is called aloe vera. It's really effective against burns and infections. Maybe it could work here too." The room fell silent. Several of the Zorathians exchanged incredulous looks, muttering among themselves. One of them, a scientist named Nira, scoffed loudly. "Primitive methods? You expect us to believe that a simple plant could succeed where our technology has failed?" Daniel flushed, feeling heat rise to his cheeks. "I'm not saying it's better than your tech. I'm just saying it's different. Sometimes simpler. Solutions can be overlooked because they're, well, simple." Vexa studied him for a long moment, her glowing eyes unreadable. Finally she nodded. "Very well, bring us this plant. We will test it." Relief washed over Daniel, though he knew the hardest part was yet to come. He turned to Rachel, who gave him a small, encouraging smile. "Good luck," she murmured. "You're going to need it." Later that evening, Daniel returned to the EOS, rummaging through the storage compartments until he found what he was looking for, a small container of dried aloe vera leaves. They had been included as part of the cultural exchange package meant to showcase Earth's biodiversity. Holding the container in his hands, Daniel felt a strange mix too. Daniel sat alone in the dimly lit cabin of the EOS, staring at the small container of dried aloe vera leaves. His hands trembled slightly as he turned it over and over, examining the label that read Aloe Vera, Earth Plant. The weight of what he was about to do pressed down on him. He wasn't a doctor or a scientist. He was just a mechanic who happened to know a thing or two about plants because of his grandmother. Yet here he was, holding something that might save the life of an alien, and possibly alter the course of human-alien relations forever. Rachel found him there a short while later, leaning against the wall with a troubled expression. She stopped in the doorway, her arms crossed. "You're still thinking about it, aren't you?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. Daniel looked up, startled. "Yeah," he admitted. "I can't stop thinking about it. What if this actually works? What if I'm the only one who can help them?" Rachel sighed and stepped into the room, closing the hatch behind her. "And what if it doesn't work? What if you make things worse? You heard Nira back there. They already think we're primitive compared to them. If this fails, they'll never trust us." "I know," Daniel said, running a hand through his hair. "But what's the alternative? Just sit back and watch Kale die when I might have a way to save him. That doesn't feel right either." Rachel didn't answer immediately. Instead, she sat down across from him, studying his face. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the mix of fear and determination. Finally, she spoke. "If you're going to do this, you need to be careful. Really careful. We can't afford any mistakes." "Daniel." nodded slowly. I will be. I promise. The next morning, the humans were invited to observe as the Zorathians continued their attempts to treat Kale. The alien scientist lay motionless on a translucent table, surrounded by glowing instruments and hovering drones. His condition had worsened overnight. The greenish swelling around his wound now pulsed faintly, like it had a life of its own. The Zorathian physicians moved with quiet urgency, their long fingers manipulating controls on sleek panels. But despite their efforts, nothing seemed to work. Daniel stood near the back of the room, clutching the container of aloe vera tightly. In his pocket, he felt out of place among the towering aliens and their advanced technology, like a child sneaking into a laboratory. Rachel stood beside him, casting nervous glances in his direction. She hadn't said anything more about his plan, but her silence spoke volumes. "Vexa," Daniel said suddenly, stepping forward before he could second-guess himself. All eyes turned to him, and he swallowed hard. May I try something? It won't hurt him, I promise." Vexa tilted her head, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "What is it you propose?" "I brought a plant from Earth," Daniel explained, pulling the container from his pocket. "It's called aloe vera. It's used to treat wounds and reduce swelling. I'd like to apply it to Kale's injury. Maybe it can help where your methods haven't." The room erupted into murmurs. Some of the Zorathians looked intrigued, while others, like Nira, seemed outright offended. "This is absurd," Nira snapped, stepping closer to Daniel. "Our technology is unparalleled. How could a mere plant possibly succeed where our science has failed?" "It's not about being better," Daniel replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's about being different. Sometimes simpler solutions are overlooked because they don't look impressive. But that doesn't mean they don't work." Vexa held up a hand, silencing the debate before it could escalate further. She studied Daniel for a long moment, then glanced at Kale. "Very well," she said finally. "You may proceed. But be warned, if this fails, the consequences will rest on your shoulders." Daniel nodded, his heart pounding. "Thank you." Back in the medical bay, Daniel prepared the aloe vera with trembling hands. Under the watchful eyes of the Zorathians, he carefully ground the dried leaves into a fine powder using a mortar and pestle provided by the aliens. Then, he mixed it with a small amount of water until it formed a thick paste. The scent was earthy and familiar, reminding him of summer afternoons spent helping his grandmother in her garden. As he approached Kale, Daniel felt every eye in the room boring into him. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, and gently applied the paste to the alien's wound. The texture of Kale's skin was cool and smooth, unlike anything Daniel had ever touched before. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the swelling began to subside. Gasps rippled through the room as the Zorathians watched in stunned silence. The greenish hue faded, replaced by a healthier, silvery tone. Kale's breathing evened out, and his eyelids fluttered open. He gazed up at Daniel, confusion and gratitude mingling in his luminous eyes. "You helped me?" Kale rasped, his voice weak but clear. Daniel nodded, unsure how much of his words the alien would understand. "Yeah, I hope so." Kale closed his eyes again, slipping back into unconsciousness, but the improvement was undeniable. The Zorathians exchanged astonished looks, their skepticism giving way to curiosity. Even Nira seemed shaken, though she quickly masked her reaction with a scowl. Rachel appeared at Daniel's side, gripping his arm tightly. "You did it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "You actually did it." Daniel shook his head, still processing what had just happened. "I can't believe it worked. I mean, I hoped it would, but wow." Later that evening, Daniel and Rachel returned to the Eos, exhausted but exhilarated. Word of Kale's recovery had spread quickly among the Zorathians, and the humans were treated with newfound respect, or at least cautious interest. Still, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing. Nira's hostility lingered in his mind, a reminder that not everyone welcomed change. As they sat together in the ship's common area, Rachel turned to Daniel with a serious expression. "We need to be careful," she said. "Not everyone is going to be happy about this. Nira especially. She's not going to let this go easily." "I know," Daniel replied, rubbing his temples. "But what choice did I have? Letting Kale die wasn't an option." "No, it wasn't," Rachel agreed. "Still, we should expect pushback. Aliens don't like having their beliefs challenged, especially when it comes to something as important as medicine." Daniel nodded, staring out the window at the alien landscape beyond. The planet's twin suns were setting, casting the horizon in shades of orange and purple. It was beautiful, but Daniel barely noticed. His thoughts were consumed by the implications of what he'd done. He had crossed a line, challenging the Zorathians' faith in their own superiority. Whether that was a good thing or a bad thing remained to be seen. For now, all he could do was wait and hope that the trust he'd earned wouldn't be overshadowed by resentment. The days following Kale's recovery were a whirlwind of activity for Daniel and Rachel. The Zorathians, though initially skeptical, couldn't ignore the results. Their leader, Vexa, ordered a full investigation into the properties of aloe vera and other earth plants. Labs buzzed with activity as scientists worked tirelessly to analyze samples brought from the Eos. For the first time, the aliens seemed genuinely intrigued by human knowledge, not just their technology, but their traditions and practices. Daniel found himself at the center of it all. He was invited to join the research team, sharing what he knew about the medicinal uses of various plants. It wasn't much, just fragments of information passed down from his grandmother, but it was enough to spark curiosity among the Zorathians. They listened intently as he described how chamomile could soothe irritation, how lavender calmed nerves, and how peppermint eased nausea. Each explanation was met with nods and murmurs of interest. Rachel, on the other hand, kept her distance. She observed the proceedings with a mix of pride and unease, watching as Daniel became something of a celebrity among the aliens. While she admired his courage, she couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing beneath the surface. Nira, in particular, remained a constant presence, her sharp eyes following Daniel's every move. One evening, after another long day in the lab, Daniel and Rachel returned to the Eos to unwind. The ship's living quarters were quiet, save for the faint hum of its systems. Rachel sat cross-legged on the floor, scrolling through updates from Earth, while Daniel leaned against the wall, staring at the ceiling. "You're getting too close to them," Rachel said suddenly, breaking the silence. Daniel blinked, startled. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're letting yourself get swept up in all this attention," she replied, setting her tablet aside. "You've become their golden boy. Don't you think that's dangerous?" Daniel frowned. "I'm just trying to help. Isn't that why we're here? To build bridges?" "Yes, but there's a difference between building bridges and burning them," Rachel countered. "You saw how Nira reacted when you suggested using aloe vera. She doesn't trust us, and she definitely doesn't like seeing one of her own healed by something as primitive as a plant. I didn't ask for any of this," Daniel said, frustration creeping into his voice. "I just did what I thought was right. And look, they're listening now. Doesn't that count for something?" "It does," Rachel admitted. "But don't forget who we're dealing with. These are aliens, Daniel. They may seem friendly, but we still don't know everything about them. Pushing too hard could backfire." Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "So what am I supposed to do? Stop helping? Pretend none of this happened?" "No," Rachel said firmly. "Just be careful. Keep your guard up. And remember, you're representing humanity, not just yourself." The next morning, tensions began to surface. As Daniel entered the lab, he noticed Nira standing near the workstation where he'd been working the day before. Her arms were crossed, and her expression was unreadable. Several other Zorathians stood nearby, whispering among themselves. "Good morning," Daniel greeted cautiously, unsure of what to expect. Nira turned to face him, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "Your methods are intriguing," she said, her tone laced with skepticism. "But they raise questions. Questions about our own practices and about yours." "What kind of questions?" Daniel asked, bracing himself. "For instance," Nira continued, stepping closer, "why would humans rely on such crude techniques when they clearly possess advanced technology? Why cling to outdated methods when progress offers better solutions?" Daniel hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It's not about choosing one over the other. Sometimes simple solutions are overlooked because they don't seem impressive, but that doesn't mean they aren't effective. Where I come from, people have used plants like these for centuries. They work. That's all that matters." Nira's lips curled into a thin smile. "How convenient. A humble story to mask your true intentions." "My intentions are exactly what I said they are," Daniel replied, keeping his voice steady. "I want to help. Nothing more." Before Nira could respond, Vexa entered the lab, her presence commanding immediate attention. "Enough," she said sharply, silencing the murmurs around her. "We are here to learn, not to argue. Daniel has offered valuable insights, and we would be wise to consider them." Nira bowed her head slightly, though her expression remained icy. "As you wish, leader." Vexa turned to Daniel, her gaze softer but no less intense. "Continue your work. We will monitor the results closely." Daniel nodded, relieved but wary. As Vexa moved away, he caught Nira glaring at him before turning to leave the lab. Rachel appeared moments later, having witnessed the exchange from the doorway. "That didn't look good," she said quietly. "No, it didn't," Daniel agreed. "But what can I do? Ignore her? Pretend she isn't suspicious?" "Not ignore her," Rachel replied. "Just don't give her ammunition. Be professional. Stick to the facts. And don't let her rattle you." Later that afternoon, disaster struck. Daniel was examining a sample of dried eucalyptus leaves under a microscope when alarms blared throughout the facility. Scientists rushed past him, shouting in their native language. Confused, Daniel followed the commotion to the botanical storage area, where chaos reigned. The room was in disarray. Shelves had been overturned, and containers of earth plants lay shattered on the floor. Fragments of leaves and stems were scattered everywhere, releasing a pungent mixture of scents. Rachel arrived shortly after, her face pale with shock. "What happened here?" she demanded, looking around. "I don't know," Daniel said, his stomach sinking. "But this can't be an accident." A group of Zorathian security officers entered the room, scanning the wreckage with handheld devices. One of them approached Daniel and Rachel, speaking in halting English. "This is sabotage. Do you know anything about it?" "No," Daniel replied quickly. "We came in after hearing the alarms." The officer nodded, jotting something down on a tablet. "We will investigate further." As the officers began collecting evidence, Rachel pulled Daniel aside. "This has Nira written all over it," she whispered. Daniel frowned. "You think she did this? It makes sense, doesn't it?" Rachel argued. "She's been against us from the start. This is her way of sending a message." "But why destroy the plants?" Daniel asked. "If she wanted to stop us, wouldn't she just confront Vexa directly?" "Maybe she's trying to discredit you," Rachel suggested. "Make it look like your methods are unreliable or worse, dangerous." Daniel's mind raced. If Rachel was right, then Nira's actions weren't just a personal attack. They threatened the entire mission. Without the plants, the Zorathians might dismiss Earth's contributions altogether, undoing all the progress they'd made. "We need proof," Daniel said finally. "Something that ties her to this." "How are we supposed to find that?" Rachel asked. "We're outsiders here. We don't even know where to start." Daniel hesitated, then glanced toward the medical bay. Cale was recovering steadily, thanks in part to the aloe vera treatment. Maybe he could help. That evening, Daniel visited Cale in the medical bay. The alien scientist was sitting up now, his strength returning slowly. When Daniel explained what had happened, Cale listened intently, his glowing eyes reflecting concern. "This is troubling," Cale said once Daniel finished. "Nira has always been cautious of outsiders, but sabotage, this goes beyond caution." You think she'd go this far?" Daniel asked. Cale hesitated. "I cannot say for certain, but if anyone stands to gain from undermining your efforts, it is her." Daniel nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. With Cale's support, maybe they could uncover the truth. Together, they devised a plan to gather evidence discreetly, enlisting the help of a few trusted Zorothians who believed in the value of Earth's knowledge. As they parted ways, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. Sabotage or not, he refused to let fear dictate his actions. Humanity had taken a step forward, proving that even the simplest solutions could hold immense power, and he wasn't about to let anyone take that away. The next few days were tense for Daniel and Rachel. The sabotage in the botanical lab had cast a shadow over their mission, and suspicion lingered in the air like a storm waiting to break. While the Zorothians worked to clean up the mess and salvage what they could of the remaining Earth plants, Nira's hostility became more pronounced. She avoided direct confrontation, but made her feelings clear through sharp remarks and icy glares whenever Daniel entered a room. Despite the challenges, Daniel pressed on. With Cale's help, he began documenting everything he knew about Earth's plants, how they grew, how they were used, and what benefits they offered. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep the research moving forward. Rachel assisted by organizing the information into charts and diagrams that the Zorothians could easily understand. Together, they hoped to prove that Earth's natural remedies weren't primitive or outdated. They were practical and effective. Cale played a key role in bridging the gap between the humans and his people. Having experienced the healing power of aloe vera firsthand, he became an advocate for exploring Earth's methods further. He often joined Daniel and Rachel in the lab, asking questions and offering insights based on his own scientific expertise. His presence helped ease some of the tension, though Nira remained a constant obstacle. One evening, as the trio worked late into the night, Cale leaned back in his chair and let out a low hum sound that Daniel had come to recognize as thoughtful contemplation among the Zorothians. "You know," Cale said slowly, "Nira fears change. Many of us do, but fear should not dictate progress." Daniel nodded, setting down the leaf he'd been examining. "I get that. Change is hard. Back home, there are always debates about new ideas versus old ones. Sometimes people hold on to what they know because it feels safe." "Safe, yes," Cale agreed, "but safety can also mean stagnation. If we refuse to adapt, we risk losing opportunities for growth." Rachel looked up from her tablet, her brow furrowed. "Do you think she'll ever accept our methods? Or will she keep fighting us every step of the way?" Cale's glowing eyes softened. "It is difficult to say. Nira is proud and pride can be both a strength and a weakness. But perhaps if we show her undeniable proof of your method's value, she may reconsider." "That's easier said than done," Daniel muttered. "Especially with half the plants destroyed. We must work with what we have," Cale replied firmly, "and make the most of it." The following morning, Daniel and Rachel arrived at the lab early, determined to make progress despite the setbacks. They found Vexa waiting for them, her expression unreadable. Beside her stood two Zorothian security officers, their metallic uniforms gleaming under the artificial lights. "Good morning," Vexa said, her melodic voice calm but serious. "We have completed our investigation into the sabotage incident." Daniel's heart sank. He braced himself for bad news, but Vexa continued before he could speak. The evidence points to internal interference, she explained. While no individual has been identified yet, it is clear that someone within our ranks sought to undermine this project. Nira's name hung unspoken in the air, but Vexa didn't mention her directly. Instead, she turned to Daniel and Rachel. I want you to know that I support your efforts. This act of vandalism will not deter us from pursuing knowledge. However, I urge caution. Trust is fragile, and incidents like this only deepen divisions. Thank you, Rachel said softly. We appreciate your trust. We'll do everything we can to make this work. Vexa nodded, then gestured for the security officers to leave. Once they were alone, she added, continue your research. And remember, you are not alone in this. There are many among us who believe in collaboration. As Vexa departed, Daniel exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Well, that could have gone worse. True, Rachel agreed, though her tone was cautious. But she didn't exactly clear Nira either. If anything, this makes things even more complicated. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. We need to find a way to win her over, or at least neutralize her influence. Otherwise, she'd keep finding ways to block us. Later that day, Cale approached Daniel and Rachel with an idea. There may be a way to demonstrate the effectiveness of your methods beyond doubt, he said. A public demonstration. A what? Daniel asked, startled. A presentation, Cale clarified. Invite members of the council, including Nira, to witness the results of your experiments. Show them the data, the samples, and the improvements. In my condition, let them see for themselves. Rachel frowned. That's risky. What if something goes wrong during the demo? We don't exactly have backup supplies. It's a calculated risk, Cale admitted. But it may be our best chance to sway opinion in your favor. Daniel hesitated, weighing the pros and cons. On one hand, a public demonstration could solidify their credibility and silence critics like Nira. On the other hand, failure would confirm her accusations and damage human-alien relations irreparably. I'll do it, Daniel said finally, meeting Cale's gaze. But we need to prepare carefully. Every detail has to be perfect. Over the next several days, the team worked tirelessly to organize the demonstration. They gathered all available data, prepared visual aids, and rehearsed explanations in simple terms that even non-scientists could understand. Cale volunteered to serve as a living example of the treatment's success, allowing images of his recovery to be displayed alongside the presentation. The day of the event arrived, and the main hall of the facility buzzed with anticipation. Members of the Zarathian Council filled the seats, their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. Nira sat near the front, her arms crossed and her posture rigid. Vexa presided over the gathering, her presence lending an air of authority to the proceedings. Daniel stood at the podium, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the microphone. Rachel stood nearby, ready to assist if needed. Taking a deep breath, he began. Thank you for coming today, Daniel said, his voice steady despite his nerves. What I'm about to share isn't just about plants, it's about the power of cooperation. When I first arrived here, I didn't expect to contribute much. I'm not a scientist or a doctor. But I do know a little about Earth's plants, thanks to my grandmother. And when Cale was injured, I saw an opportunity to help. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. These plants like aloe vera are simple, yes. But simplicity doesn't mean ineffectiveness. In fact, sometimes the simplest solutions are the most powerful. Let me show you. With Rachel's help, Daniel presented slides showing the properties of various earth plants, along with graphs illustrating their effects on health. He highlighted the reduction in Cale's swelling and shared before and after images of the wound. Finally, Cale himself stepped forward, speaking briefly about his experience and expressing gratitude for the treatment. When the presentation ended, the room fell silent. For a moment, Daniel feared the worst, that his efforts had fallen flat. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the audience. Vexa rose to her feet, clapping steadily, and others followed suit. Nira remained seated, her face impassive. But as the applause grew louder, she glanced around the room, seemingly realizing she was outnumbered. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Afterward, Vexa approached Daniel and Rachel, her expression warm. "You have done well," she said. "Your methods have earned our respect and our trust." "Thank you," Daniel replied, relief washing over him. "This is just the beginning. There's so much more we can learn from each other." As they left the hall, Rachel nudged Daniel with a smile. "Not bad for a guy who fixes spaceships, huh?" Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "Let's just hope Nira doesn't try anything else. One crisis per mission is enough for me." But deep down, he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. While they had won this battle, the war for acceptance was far from over. The success of the demonstration brought a wave of relief to Daniel and Rachel, but it didn't last long. Nira's silence was unnerving. She hadn't openly opposed them since the event, but her absence from the labs and meetings spoke volumes. It was as if she were plotting something behind the scenes, waiting for the right moment to strike. Daniel tried to focus on the work at hand, helping the Zorathians analyze the remaining Earth plants. They had managed to salvage a few samples, including chamomile and lavender, which showed promise in treating minor ailments. Kale remained a steadfast ally, encouraging the team to document every step of their experiments so they could share the findings with both humans and Zorathians alike. But even Kale couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing. One evening, as Daniel and Rachel reviewed notes in the EOS, Kale arrived unexpectedly. His expression was grave, and he wasted no time getting to the point. "We have a problem," he said, his voice low. "Nira has been spreading rumors among the council members. She claims your methods are unpredictable and potentially dangerous." Rachel frowned. "Dangerous? How can she say that when we've proven otherwise?" Kale sighed. "She argues that because you lack formal training, your treatments could cause harm in the long term. She's also questioning why you brought these plants in the first place. Some are starting to wonder if you had ulterior motives." Daniel groaned, running a hand through his hair. "This is ridiculous. We're not spies or saboteurs. We're here to help." "I know that," Kale replied gently. "But fear and doubt are powerful tools. If Nira convinces enough people, it could undo everything we've accomplished." Rachel crossed her arms, her frustration evident. "So, what do we do? Just sit back and let her smear our names?" "No," Kale said firmly. "We fight back with evidence. I suggest we conduct a controlled experiment using one of the plants. Something safe yet effective. Then invite the council to observe the process from start to finish. Transparency will be key." Daniel nodded slowly. "Okay, let's try it. What plant should we use?" "Chamomile," Rachel suggested. "It's gentle and widely used for calming effects. Plus, we still have enough left to test properly." "Agreed," Kale said. "Let's prepare everything carefully. This may be our best chance to counter Nira's accusations." The next morning, the team set to work designing the experiment. They chose a group of Zorathian volunteers who suffered from stress-related symptoms, a common issue due to the high-pressure environment of their society. Chamomile tea was prepared under strict supervision, ensuring hygiene and accuracy. Each step was documented meticulously, from measuring the dried flowers to brewing the tea at precise temperatures. As word spread about the upcoming experiment, anticipation grew. Even Nira attended, though she kept her distance, watching with a cold detachment that made Daniel uneasy. Vexa presided over the session, her presence lending an air of authority to the proceedings. When the volunteers drank the tea, The room fell silent. Everyone waited anxiously for results. Within minutes, subtle changes became apparent. The volunteers reported feeling calmer, more relaxed. Their glowing eyes softened and their tense postures eased. Instruments monitoring their vital signs confirmed the improvement. Heart rates slowed, and stress markers decreased significantly. Vexa turned to Nira, her tone firm but polite. "Do you dispute these results?" Nira hesitated, clearly caught off guard. Finally she replied, "This is only one test. More data is needed before drawing conclusions." "Then we will continue testing," Vexa said decisively. "But this demonstrates clear potential we cannot ignore." The tension in the room eased slightly, though Nira's scowl deepened. As the session ended, she stormed out without another word. Despite the successful experiment, Nira's hostility lingered like a storm cloud. Over the following days, small incidents began to occur: equipment malfunctioning, notes going missing, and supplies being misplaced. At first, Daniel dismissed them as coincidences, but Rachel wasn't convinced. "This isn't random," she said one evening as they reviewed damaged data logs. "Someone's targeting us. And I think we both know who." Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "What does she hope to achieve?" "Every time she tries to sabotage us, we find a way to recover. Doesn't she realize she's making herself look worse?" "Maybe," Rachel replied thoughtfully. "Or maybe she's trying to provoke us into doing something reckless, something that would justify her distrust." "You mean like losing our tempers?" Daniel asked. "Exactly," Rachel said. "If we react emotionally, she wins. We need to stay calm and professional, no matter what." Their resolve was tested sooner than expected. Early one morning, Daniel arrived at the lab to find chaos. A containment unit holding the last batch of chamomile flowers had been tampered with, causing a minor leak. The delicate petals were wilting rapidly, and the air smelled faintly of rot. "Oh no," Daniel muttered, rushing to assess the damage. He called for help, and within minutes, Rachel and Cale joined him. "What happened?" Rachel demanded, her voice sharp with alarm. "Sabotage," Cale said grimly. "And I suspect we know who's responsible." Before anyone could respond, Nira entered the lab, her expression smug. "Another failure," she said loudly, glancing around the room. "How unfortunate. Perhaps your methods aren't as reliable as you claim." Daniel clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. But Rachel stepped forward, placing a calming hand on his arm. "It's not a failure," she said evenly, meeting Nira's gaze. "Accidents happen, even in the most advanced facilities. What matters is how we respond. We'll salvage what we can and adapt. That's what science is all about," Nira sneered. "Adaptation won't save you this time. Your supplies are nearly gone, and your credibility is slipping. Soon, the Council will see you for what you truly are: primitive intruders." Cale stepped forward, his voice firm. "Enough, Nira. Your actions speak louder than your words. You accuse them of incompetence while deliberately undermining their efforts. Is this really about protecting our people or preserving your pride?" For the first time, Nira faltered. Her glowing eyes flickered with uncertainty, and she took a step back. "I am protecting our people," she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "No," Cale countered. "You're letting fear guide you. Fear of change, fear of outsiders. But change is inevitable. And sometimes it brings unexpected benefits." Nira opened her mouth to argue but stopped herself. Instead, she turned and walked away, leaving the room in tense silence. Afterward, Daniel and Rachel worked tirelessly to salvage the remaining chamomile. Though much of it was ruined, they managed to extract a small amount of usable material. With Cale's help, they devised a plan to replicate its properties synthetically, combining Zorithian technology with Earth's natural knowledge. As they worked side by side, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. Nira's attempts to derail them had only strengthened their resolve. They weren't just proving the value of Earth's plants, they were demonstrating humanity's resilience and ingenuity. By the end of the week, they had created a synthetic version of chamomile extract. Tests showed it was just as effective as the original, if not more so. When presented to the council, the results were met with cautious optimism. Even Nira couldn't deny its potential. Though tensions remained, the tide seemed to be turning. For the first time since arriving, Daniel allowed himself to feel hopeful. Humanity and the Zorethians were learning to bridge their differences, one small step at a time. And as he looked out at the alien landscape beyond the lab windows, he realized that sometimes the simplest solutions could lead to the greatest discoveries. The days that followed were a mix of triumph and tension for Daniel, Rachel, and their Zorathian allies. The synthetic chamomile extract had been a turning point, earning cautious approval from even the most skeptical members of the council. Nira, however, remained a thorn in their side. She hadn't openly opposed them since the sabotaged containment unit incident, but her hostility simmered beneath the surface, waiting for an opportunity to resurface. Daniel and Rachel tried to focus on the positives. The collaboration between humans and Zorathians was growing stronger, with more scientists showing interest in Earth's natural remedies. Kale played a crucial role in fostering this partnership, often acting as a mediator when misunderstandings arose. His recovery continued to serve as living proof of the plant's effectiveness, and his support gave Daniel and Rachel the confidence to push forward despite the challenges. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in. Late one evening, as they sat together in the EOS, Rachel voiced what they'd both been thinking. "Do you think we've done enough?" she asked, staring at the glowing stars outside the window. "I mean, we've made progress, but is it enough to secure trust between our species?" Daniel shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "Hard to say. We've shown them that Earth has something valuable to offer, but trust takes time. Especially after everything Nira's done." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "She's not going to stop, you know. Even if the council fully accepts us, she'd find ways to undermine us. I don't think she'd ever let go of her pride. Her fear." "Maybe," Daniel replied, "but we can't control her. All we can do is keep proving ourselves. Show them that we're here to help, not to harm." The next morning brought unexpected news. Vexa summoned Daniel and Rachel to the main hall where the entire council had gathered. The atmosphere was tense, and the aliens' glowing eyes reflected a mix of anticipation and concern. "Thank you for coming," Vexa began, her voice calm but serious. "We have reached a decision regarding your contributions and Nira's accusations." Daniel's heart raced. He glanced at Rachel, who gave him a small, reassuring nod. Vexa continued, addressing the room. "Your methods have proven effective, and your intentions appear genuine. However, Nira raises valid concerns about the long-term implications of integrating foreign practices into our society. To address these concerns, we propose a trial period. During this time, we will implement your treatments alongside our own methods, monitoring their effects closely." "That sounds fair," Rachel said quickly before Daniel could speak. "We're happy to cooperate." Vexa inclined her head slightly. "Good, but there is another matter to discuss. Nira has requested a formal hearing to present her case against you. As leaders, we must ensure all voices are heard." Daniel felt a knot tighten in his stomach. A hearing meant putting everything on the line again, defending their actions in front of the entire council. If they failed to convince the Zorathians of their sincerity, all their hard work could unravel. "When is the hearing?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "In 3 days," Vexa replied. "Prepare yourselves accordingly." Over the next few days, Daniel, Rachel, and their team worked tirelessly to gather evidence for the hearing. They compiled data from every experiment, documented testimonials from volunteers who had benefited from the treatments, and created visual presentations to illustrate their points clearly. Kale assisted by translating technical terms into simpler language, ensuring the council would understand even the most complex details. On the day of the hearing, the main hall was packed with Zorathians, their silvery forms shimmering under the dim lights. The council members sat at the front, their expressions unreadable. Nira stood near the podium, her posture rigid and her eyes blazing with determination. VXA opened the session, her melodic voice filling the room. This hearing will determine whether humanity's contributions warrant further integration into our society. Both sides will present their cases. Begin. Nira stepped forward first, her tone sharp and accusatory. Humans claim to offer solutions, but their methods are untested and unreliable. They lack the precision and safety protocols we value. Worse, they bring uncertainty into our world, a world built on stability and order. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. Their presence disrupts our way of life. Their so-called remedies may work now, but what happens when they fail? When lives are lost because of their primitive techniques, are we willing to take that risk? Her speech drew murmurs of agreement from some in the audience, but others remained silent, their expressions thoughtful. When she finished, Vexa gestured for Daniel to speak. Taking a deep breath, Daniel approached the podium. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice was steady. When I first came here, I didn't expect to contribute much. I'm not a scientist or a doctor, I'm just someone who knows a little about plants. But when Kale was injured, I saw an opportunity to help, and I did. He paused, meeting the glowing eyes of the council members. Our methods might seem simple, but simplicity isn't weakness. Sometimes, the simplest solutions are the most powerful. We've proven that Earth's plants can heal wounds, reduce stress, and improve health. These aren't guesses, they're facts backed by evidence. Turning to face Nira, he added, "Fear of change doesn't make us safer. It holds us back. By working together, we can combine the best of both worlds, your advanced technology and our natural knowledge. That's how we grow. That's how we move forward." The room fell silent as Daniel stepped back. Rachel joined him, squeezing his arm gently in support. For a moment, it felt like the weight of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. Finally, Vexa rose to her feet. Both sides have presented compelling arguments. Now we must decide. The council deliberated for what felt like hours. Daniel and Rachel waited anxiously, their nerves stretched thin. When Vexa returned to the podium, her expression was calm but decisive. "The council has reached a verdict," she announced. "Humanity's contributions will be integrated into our medical practices on a trial basis. However, strict oversight will remain in place to ensure safety and efficacy." Nira's concerns have been noted, but progress requires bold steps. Aha! Wave of relief washed over Daniel and Rachel. They had won for now. As the crowd dispersed, Kale approached them, his glowing eyes warm with pride. "You've done well," he said. "This is a victory for both our peoples." In the weeks that followed, the collaboration between humans and Zorathians flourished. Earth's plants became a cornerstone of their joint research, leading to breakthroughs neither species could have achieved alone. Nira retreated into the background, her influence waning as more Zorathians embraced the new partnership. As the EOS prepared to depart, Daniel and Rachel stood on the launch pad, surrounded by their alien friends. Vexa thanked them for their courage and dedication, while Kale expressed his gratitude once more. "You've changed us for the better," Kale said, "and we've changed you. This is only the beginning." Back aboard the ship, Daniel gazed out the viewport as the planet shrank into the distance. Rachel joined him, a smile tugging at her lips. "We did it," she said softly. "Against all odds, we actually did it." Daniel nodded, feeling a sense of accomplishment he'd never expected. "Yeah, we did. And maybe, just maybe, we've given humanity a chance to prove itself, not as conquerors or competitors, but as partners. As the stars stretched ahead of them, Daniel realized that sometimes the smallest gestures, like rubbing an earth leaf on a wound, could spark the greatest changes.